So this has had about 24 hours to dry, which means that we're looking at dealing with all the seam lines on the fuselage. You can see what I've added is just a few drops of submitted surface of 1500. In this case, it's in mahogany. But the only thing I'm doing that for is just to make sure there's no actual gaps. I'm not too interested in sanding too much of this slight ledge here, because it's all part of the panel detail, and so with very little work will be practically invisible on the finished thing. So it's worth looking sometimes at what actually needs to be sanded, because sometimes you'll find that a join line is tight. There might be some unevenness there, but if it's tight along where there's going to be a panel line on the finished model, you don't necessarily have to do a lot of sanding there, because it's just going to look like a panel line. So always worth checking that sort of thing out. Now you can use, obviously, I would, or most people I should say, would use Mr. Colour Thinner or something like that for this, but I'm going to use just isopropyl alcohol, because what happens is it requires a bit more work to remove excess, but is less aggressive. So you can see that it is actually removing just far less aggressively than Mr. Colour would. Which is what I want, because I don't want the thinner to get into the actual gap, which is, I'm relying on this here to just fill a couple of tiny little gaps that were present along that join there, but I don't want to eradicate the join, as it were, if that makes sense. I do want to make sure there's no see-through area, but I'm not too worried about the join still being visible, because, as I say, it's along a panel line. So yeah, you can see that it requires perhaps a little bit more rubbing than using Mr. Colour Thinner, but you can see it quite quickly starts to. So what we've got is, this is a top section, this is an insert here, this is an insert here. We've got a panel line here and here, and what I'm going to do is just make sure that those panel lines will remain during the cleanup of the seam line. So quite often, if you've got a panel line that's going across a seam, if you deepen that panel line before you start dealing with the seam, it will just make sure that it remains there. While you're dealing with the seam, which is just a little bit easier to deal with than completely eradicating that seam and then having to restore it. So now all I'm going to do is just use a fragment of sanding stick here. The thing is, there's a lot of panel details, or a lot of sections that come together here. So potentially, if you were clumsy here, you would end up with quite a lot of panel detail potentially erased and having to be restored. But overall, the kit goes together nicely enough. But with a bit of care, none of it should be a problem. I'm just looking. Ah, there we go. That's what I wanted. So then I'm going for the 1500 grit Infini sander there, because you can take that right across the whole lot. Without any risk. Oof. There we go. And then this should be able to use a bit of Scotch-Brite to clean out the panel detail. And we're just moving around to anywhere so again along here there's some rivets. It's worth making sure as you go you just get rid of the you sort of deepen them, I should say, not get rid of. But again, I'm not actually trying to remove this seam as such, because the seam would be there on the real aircraft. All I'm doing is doing some very, very light sanding here. Just to level it up, and again. The good thing is this has all gone together without any actual gaps, just a little smidgen of unevenness. Like I say, pretty much a tribute to the kit here. And there's a tiny little bit just at the front of the just at the front of the gun trough here. Which you just clean out like that. Now at some point I will give that a coat of primer, just to see how we're looking, but for the most part there isn't too much more needs doing to that area in front of the canopy there. And around here, so that was that. So remarkably, the fit there across the join at the rear fuselage, that's it done. All I'm going to do is there's a couple of panel lines that are a tiny bit indistinct because of the draft angle. Which is a technology issue, not a problem, not a fault of the kit as such, it's just those draft angles. So I'm just letting letting the weight of the scriber here do the work. So a couple of places that what you'll find with sometimes the scriber is some parts of this will hit, sort of it's hitting that headrest there. So I've got a blade here which is just in a much finer handle, which I can just allow, and I'm honestly, guys, there's no pressure being applied, and initially if you push it, it'll start to eke out the panel line, but will follow the actual line much easier than trying to pull it, and also won't do as much damage if you drag it out of the panel line and across the model. But with that in place, there's no pressure being applied here. Like so. And then I'll start pushing the 1500 grit across the top. So the other thing is, what you can hopefully see now is the rivet detail, which I need to now carry across the top. Basically trying to find it. There's that one there. So yeah, that's just carrying that across the top there. That can go now like so. Again, it will have, there will be a coat of paint, a light coat of paint over that, just to check the seam at some point. So we're looking at the tail planes here. Quite happy that this 1500 grit again, the tail planes are such a good fit that this is more about removing the glue marks that were caused when I cemented it in place. Than it is about removing any dealing with any seam as such, because the seam is pretty much perfect. And on the underside there, hopefully you can see how pretty much perfect that is. So This draft angle here was a little bit steeper, so we don't have as much of a faded line on this side of on the underside, but I still think it's worth doing that. Yeah, so there we go. That's that little detail dealt with. So there's that. Okay. That's restored that detail back to the 1500, like so. And there's that. So that's that. There's a little bit here that will need to be dealt with, but I'll deal with that when the main wing's in place. So pretty much that's all of these joins, you know, like pre-paint check, I should say, dealt with. So what will happen is at the end of the main construction, when it's all together, obviously I'll give it a coat of, I don't know, either mahogany or something like that, and that will throw any remaining fit issues into relief for us to deal with. So you can see that as that goes across there, that's all coming off. So the next thing I want to do is glue the wings in place. So if you saw the last little tester video I did, you remember that I did a little bit of work I did a little bit of work around here to remove a bracing piece, which then allowed this portion of the wing to sit in place. So there's a couple of little what look like they should be locating pins here, but they are really tiny, and I can see that if they don't line up 100%, then you're going to have that they're going to create slight problems. So I've just removed them. Now what I haven't done at this point is, apart from a light scraping along the wing seams, I haven't really dealt with too much in the way of the top and bottom wing join, if you like. So I will deal with that, the leading and trailing edges, if you like, once the wing's together, because it's also going to create some joins around here that are going to need to be dealt with. So at this point, there's a little lip here which goes under there and helps that to locate, and then that will just squeeze into place like so. You can, if you like. I'm looking for a suitable little clamp. None of the ones I've got are really very good. Burner clamp here, but I don't really like burner clamps. These don't work. The burner clamps should be a great idea, but because these, because the carbon fibre rod which creates the tension is circular, it means that if you're slightly out of alignment, it just twists and separates itself. If that was square, so they were locked in, you know, they were locked in line, these would be much better. And I'm sure that since the release of burner clamps, somebody has probably done that. But that said, I'm just using that burner clamp there just to give it a very light squeeze there. And you can see that there will go in like so. Okay, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to use a bit of a very tiny bead of Tamiya extra thin quick setting, just to push that into place, and that's all it's going to need there. So what I'll be quite tempted to do now is look for a way to clamp that into place. And with that there, I'm going to this will evaporate off so quickly that any excess isn't going to do any damage to the surface of the plastic, but it is going to get into that joint end. And that's what I meant about burner clamps. A little bit of shonky pressure there, and they immediately separated like that, look. So, they're incredibly frustrating things to use. They're great when they work, but they don't work as well as you might like. So there's the wings. There's the wings in place now. A little bit of clamping just to keep them there, and we will come back to that tomorrow. So thanks for tuning in.